The skies above Singapore blazed with plasma fire as Commander Sarah Chen watched another Terra dropship descend through the smoke-filled atmosphere. From her position in the partially collapsed Raffles Hotel, she tracked its movement through thermal binoculars, her free hand gripping the radio that connected her to the remnants of her Special Forces unit. "They're not learning," she muttered, noting how the alien ship followed the same approach vector as the previous three. The Terra, for all their advanced technology, seemed incapable of adapting their tactics. "All units, maintain position," she whispered into the radio. "Same drill as before. Let them think they've found our weakness." The acknowledgments came back in clicks. Her team had learned early that the Terra could detect voice transmissions, but struggled with burst signals. The dropship's landing thrusters kicked up debris from the cratered street below. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile as she watched the alien combat frames deploy. 12-foot-tall mechanized suits that could shrug off conventional artillery. The Terra considered them invincible, which was exactly why Sarah's plan would work. "They're in the kill zone," her XO reported via burst transmission. "Counting 16 frames, standard diamond formation." Sarah checked her watch. The human resistance had been fighting for 72 hours straight, using everything from improvised explosives to rewired construction equipment. The aliens seemed genuinely confused by humanity's refusal to surrender despite their technological superiority. "What's the status on the sewage line charges?" she asked. "Primed and ready. They're right on top of the weakened section." Sarah took a deep breath. "All units, execute on my mark." The Terra frames moved with mechanical precision, their energy weapons sweeping the surrounding buildings. They were looking up, as always, expecting resistance from the high ground. None of them fought to scan below. Mark. The street erupted. The carefully weakened sewage line, packed with explosives and metal scrap, turned into a kilometer-long fragmentation mine. The blast wasn't powerful enough to destroy the frames directly, but it didn't need to be. The explosion transformed the road into a sinkhole, plunging the alien units into a maze of underground tunnels and broken infrastructure. Phase 2. Sarah commanded, already moving. Her unit emerged from their hiding spots, carrying jury-rigged electromagnetic pulse devices cobbled together from civilian electronics. The Terra frames, their sensors scrambled by the confined space and interference, couldn't target effectively. Sarah led the charge herself, sliding down the rubble into the chaos below. The aliens had never experienced this kind of combat. Close quarters, three-dimensional warfare in an environment that negated their technological advantages. Their frames, designed for open battlefield superiority, became liabilities in the tight tunnels. "Keep them separated," she shouted, watching her soldiers use the terrain to isolate individual frames. The aliens' rigid combat protocols worked against them. They couldn't process the seemingly illogical ways humans use their environment as a weapon. The battle turned into a brutal close-quarters engagement. Sarah's unit used shaped charges to breach frame armor at point-blank range, while others lured the aliens into collapsed tunnels. The Terra's attempts to maintain formation in the confined space only made them more vulnerable. Above ground, hidden teams used modified construction equipment to collapse more streets, trapping the alien reinforcements in kill zones of their own. The sound of battle echoed through the underground network, punctuated by the distinctive crack of human weapons and the higher-pitched whine of alien energy discharges. Sarah found herself face-to-face with a Terra frame in a partially flooded tunnel. The alien machine towered over her, its energy weapon charging. But Sarah had already pulled the release on a nearby water main. The pressurized blast caught the frame's legs, destabilizing it just long enough for her team to plant charges on its joints. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, 16 Terra frames lay destroyed in the tunnels beneath Singapore, and not a single human life had been lost in the engagement. But the real impact came hours later, when the Galactic Federation's observation platforms captured and analyzed the entire battle. The footage spread rapidly through alien military networks. Humans, using primitive ballistic weapons and improvised explosives, had destroyed an elite Keth-era mechanized unit. The Federation's Strategic Council convened an emergency session. The recording showed something that terrified them: adaptability, creativity, and a complete disregard for conventional military doctrine. Humans didn't just fight, they reinvented combat with every engagement. 1 week later, Sarah received a message from the Federation. They wanted her to teach, not just humans, but aliens from across the galaxy. They had realized that humanity possessed something their civilizations had lost centuries ago: the ability to turn disadvantages into weapons, to think beyond established protocols, to embrace chaos as a tactical tool. The Terran Combat Academy was established the next day, with Commander Sarah Chen as its first chief combat instructor. As she stood in the ruins of Singapore, reading the Federation's offer, she realized that humanity's greatest victory wasn't defeating the Keth-era invasion. It was showing the galaxy that true combat excellence came from the mind, not technology. The age of human combat doctrine had begun. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the Academy's main training hall, studying the beings that would become her first class. The morning light filtered through Singapore's reconstructed skyline, casting strange shadows across even stranger forms. "Let me get this straight," she said to Varks, the crystalline Arcturian whose transparent body refracted light into rainbow patterns across the floor. "You've never experienced pain. Our crystalline matrix redistributes force evenly throughout our structure," Varks chimed, their voice resonating like wind through glass. "When we shatter, we simply reform. The concept of pain as you understand it is foreign." Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose. Beside Varks, the gaseous form of K-Thin swirled in its containment field, its purple-tinted consciousness streaming in complex patterns. The Nephlox Collective had spent the first hour trying to understand why solid beings bothered with doors when walls were, from their perspective, merely suggestions. And then there was Zixri, the hive mind being occupied 7 distinct bodies, each one moving in perfect synchronization. They were currently attempting to perform push-ups, but every time one body tired, Zixri would simply abandon it and continue with the others, not understanding why humans insisted on maintaining all their components. "Training begins now," Sarah announced, her voice carrying the authority that had helped her survive first contact. "Your species have mastered space travel, energy manipulation, and faster-than-light communication. But you've forgotten something fundamental: how to fight. We have extensive combat protocols." Zixri's body spoke in unison, the effect unsettling. "Our efficiency in warfare is—" "Your efficiency is precisely the problem," Sarah interrupted. "Combat isn't about efficiency. It's about survival, adaptation, and doing the impossible because the alternative is death." She approached Varks, noting how the Arcturian's crystalline form tensed, an interesting reaction for a being that claimed not to feel pain. "You," she said, "will learn that invulnerability can be a weakness. When you don't fear damage, you don't truly understand combat." Moving to Kithin's containment field, she continued, "You'll learn that having no fixed form doesn't mean you have no vulnerabilities. And you," she turned to Zixri, "will understand that each life, each body, has value beyond its tactical utility." The training began with basic human combat stances. Varks struggled, their crystalline form unable to replicate the fluid movements of human martial arts. Kithin's attempts to maintain a solid shape lasted seconds at best. Zixri performed perfectly, but with a mechanical precision that missed the point entirely. The breaking point came during the first sparring session. Zixri, facing off against a training drone, immediately sacrificed 3 of its bodies as decoys. The hive mind's scream of unexpected anguish shattered Varks into 1,000 glittering shards, while Kithin's gaseous form turned deep crimson with sympathetic distress. Sarah called an immediate halt. She knelt beside Zixri's remaining bodies, which were shaking with an emotion the hive mind had never experienced: individual loss. "This is your first lesson," she said quietly. Combat isn't about winning at any cost. It's about understanding the cost and finding a better way. Varks reformed slowly, their crystalline surface showing cracks they couldn't quite heal. I felt something when Zixri screamed. It was uncomfortable. Empathy, Sarah explained. Another thing you'll learn here. True combat excellence requires understanding pain, yours and others. Kfin's swirling form stabilized slightly. How do solid beings endure such sensation, such limitation? That's exactly what you're here to learn. Sarah stood, addressing them all. Each of you has incredible abilities. Varks, you can shatter and reform at will. Kfin, you can flow through any gap, analyze chemical compositions instantly. Zixri, your coordination across multiple bodies is unmatched. But you're all trapped by your own nature, just as humans are trapped by ours. She activated the training hall's holographic systems, filling the space with images of human combat throughout history. We learned to fight because we had to. We turned our limitations into strengths. That's what you're here to learn, not how to fight like humans, but how to fight with human adaptability. The aliens watched, transfixed, as the hologram showed humans using terrain, improvised weapons, and unconventional tactics. They saw victories won not through superior technology or physical ability, but through innovation and sheer determination. Tomorrow, Sarah announced, we start again. Varks, you'll learn to use your crystalline form as more than armor. Kifin will teach you to weaponize your gaseous state. Zixri, you'll understand the true power of coordinated independent action. As her students left the training hall, Sarah reviewed her notes. Teaching aliens how to fight was proving more complex than she'd imagined. It wasn't just about combat techniques. It was about fundamentally changing how they perceived themselves and their place in the universe. The real question was, were they ready for such change? And was the galaxy ready for what they might become? The combat demonstration was proceeding exactly as planned until the dropship engine backfired. The sound, too similar to Kethera plasma cannons, hit Sarah's combat-trained reflexes like a physical blow. One moment she was demonstrating close-quarters combat techniques. The next, she was back in Singapore's tunnels, surrounded by alien war machines. Her students watched in fascination as their instructor's body language transformed. Sarah's breathing shortened, her pupils dilated, and her muscles coiled with remembered tension. But instead of collapse, they witnessed something extraordinary. Her fear crystallized into laser-sharp focus. Varks, particularly, couldn't look away. The Arcturian had spent weeks trying to understand human combat techniques, but this involuntary demonstration of fear response opened new neural pathways in their crystalline mind. Commander, Varks approached carefully, their form shifting with uncertainty. Your biological readings indicate extreme stress, yet your combat efficiency has increased by 47%. How is this possible? Sarah forced herself back to the present, using the techniques that had kept her alive during the invasion. This, she managed, her voice steady, is what I've been trying to teach you. Fear isn't weakness, it's information. Energy. A tool, if you know how to use it. The revelation hit Varks like a plasma burst. Without warning, they initiated a controlled shatter, their crystalline form exploding into thousands of razor-sharp fragments. But instead of reforming immediately, they held the fragmented state, experiencing for the first time the terror of potentially losing cohesion. Varks, Sarah shouted, recognizing the dangerous experiment for what it was. But the Arcturian maintained their dispersed form, pushing past the instinct to reform. I understand. Varks's voice resonated from the cloud of crystal shards. Fear of permanent fragmentation. It changes how I process tactical options. New configurations become possible. Kfin's gaseous form pulsed with excitement. The human stress response. It's not just biological. It's a combat multiplier. The Nephlox Collective began experimenting with pressure differentials they'd previously considered too dangerous, learning to weaponize their own fear of dissipation. Zixri, watching through multiple sets of eyes, made perhaps the most profound breakthrough. The hive mind deliberately isolated one of its bodies, experiencing the terror of individual vulnerability. Instead of immediately reconnecting, they held the separation, learning from the fear. Each unit, Zixri's isolated body spoke alone for the first time. Each one matters. The fear of individual loss. It improves collective decision-making. Sarah watched her students' evolution with a mixture of pride and concern. The Galactic Federation's observers were recording everything, and she knew how this would look. Aliens adopting not just human combat techniques, but human psychological responses. The political implications were staggering. The Federation's reaction came swiftly. A priority communication arrived that evening. Training suspended pending investigation into neural pattern alterations in non-human students. Sarah found Orcs in the training hall that night, repeatedly shattering and reforming, each cycle pushing further into the fear response. The Arcturian's crystal surface showed stress patterns that hadn't existed before. "You should rest," Sarah advised, recognizing the signs of psychological strain. "How do you carry it?" Orcs asked, their voice resonating with new harmonics. The constant awareness of fragility. The knowledge that each moment could bring permanent ending. Sarah sat beside her student's shimmering form. "We carry it together," she explained. "Human combat units work because we share the load. Fear, pain, triumph. None of us bears it alone." That concept catalyzed something in Orcs' crystalline neural networks. They initialized a new configuration, their form reorganizing into something never before seen in Arcturian biology. A structure that balanced strength with deliberate vulnerability, defense with calculated risk. The next morning, when Federation investigators arrived to examine the students, they found something unprecedented. Each alien had begun developing neural patterns that mimicked human stress responses, but optimized for their unique physiologies. They weren't becoming more human. They were becoming more effective versions of themselves. Sarah compiled her defense carefully, knowing the future of the Academy hung in the balance. Her report highlighted the voluntary nature of the changes, the improved combat effectiveness, and most importantly, the way each species had adapted human combat psychology to enhance rather than override their natural capabilities. The Federation's final ruling arrived a week later. Training to continue. Human combat protocols deemed essential for galactic defense evolution. Note: observed neural changes classified as beneficial adaptation rather than corruption. Sarah celebrated by organizing the first cross-species combat exercise, incorporating the new developments. Watching Orcs use controlled fragmentation as both weapon and defense, Cthulhu manipulate atmospheric pressure with tactical precision, and Zixri coordinate their bodies with newfound respect for individual survival, she realized they'd stumbled upon something revolutionary. Fear, it turned out, wasn't just an evolutionary response to danger. It was a gateway to understanding the true nature of combat, a teacher that transformed alien minds not by overriding their nature, but by revealing new possibilities within it. The next phase of training could begin. The first sign of sabotage was subtle, a 0.3-second delay in the training hall's safety protocols. Sarah noticed it only because Orcs' fragmentation pattern changed fractionally, forced to compensate for the lag. Normal oversight might have missed it, but Sarah's combat instincts, honed by survival, screamed danger. Cthulhu. She subvocalized into her neural comm. "I need an atmospheric analysis of the training hall. Something's off." The Nephlox collective, now capable of maintaining coherent form while dispersed, had already begun sampling the air. Their gaseous consciousness detected trace elements that shouldn't exist in the Academy's carefully controlled environment. Nanoscale particulates detected, Cthulhu reported, their voice a whisper of controlled pressure waves. Design suggests Federation military origin. Purpose: surveillance. Sarah kept her expression neutral, continuing to observe the training session. Zixri's 7 bodies were demonstrating advanced coordination techniques to a group of Federation observers. The hive mind had learned to maintain individual awareness while linked, a development that clearly made some of the observers uncomfortable. Zixri, Sarah transmitted, passive scan of our guests. Look for artificial neural patterns. The hive mind's bodies continued their demonstration without pause, but their distributed consciousness reached out, analyzing the observers on multiple levels. 3 are not organic, came the reply. Synthetic constructs. Sophisticated, but detectable through micro-gesture analysis. Sarah had expected opposition to her training methods, but not this level of infiltration. The Federation's more conservative elements feared how human combat doctrine was changing their carefully ordered galaxy, but sending infiltration units into the Academy. This was more than simple observation. She initiated the Academy's new security protocols, designed by Orcs and implemented through Cthin's atmospheric manipulation. Microscopic crystal fragments, suspended in carefully maintained air currents, created an invisible detection grid throughout the facility. The results confirmed her fears. Someone had accessed the Academy's secure archives, copying data on the students' neural evolution. More worryingly, they'd planted correlation algorithms designed to flag any changes that could be classified as dangerous mutations. They're building a case against us, Sarah realized. The evidence would suggest that human combat training was causing irreversible psychological changes in alien species, changes that could be branded as contamination rather than evolution. Orcs, receiving the security data through their crystalline neural network, proposed an immediate response. We can track the data packets. My fragments can follow the quantum transmission signals. Too obvious, Sarah countered. They'll expect direct intervention. She turned to Cthin, whose gaseous form swirled with tactical calculations. How far have you developed those pressure manipulation techniques? The Nephlok's collective pulsed with understanding. They had learned to create microscopic pressure differentials that could interfere with electronic systems without leaving evidence of tampering. Combined with Orcs' crystal fragments as transmission media and Zixri's multi-body coordination, the counter-operation came together with beautiful precision. While the synthetic observers recorded what appeared to be a standard training session, Sarah's students executed a complex information warfare campaign. Cthin's pressure manipulations carried Orcs' crystalline data taps through the facility's systems, while Zixri's distributed consciousness monitored and adjusted their efforts in real time. They discovered the truth in fragments. Project Purity, a classified initiative to preserve galactic cultural integrity. Its supporters believed that human combat doctrine represented a fundamental threat to civilized space, not because it was ineffective, but because it worked too well. The evidence they uncovered was damning. Doctored psychological evaluations, manipulated training footage, even fabricated incidents of alien students showing aggressive regression, all designed to shut down the Academy and quarantine Earth's influence. But the conspirators had made a crucial mistake. They had judged the Academy's aliens by their original parameters, not recognizing how human combat training had transformed them. Orcs wasn't just a crystalline entity anymore, but a being who understood how to weaponize vulnerability. Cthin had evolved beyond simple gaseous existence to master the subtle interplay of pressure and information. And Zixri had learned that true strength came from coordinated independence, not blind unity. Sarah gathered her students in the secure underground facility, a remnant of the Terra invasion they'd converted into a command center. They'll move soon, she told them. Now that we've detected their surveillance, they'll have to act before we can expose Project Purity. Orcs' crystalline form hummed with combat harmonics. Let them come. We are not the beings they expect to find. Cthin's gaseous consciousness formed complex tactical patterns. Their models cannot account for our evolution. Zixri's bodies moved with synchronized purpose. We will show them the true power of adaptation. Sarah smiled, recognizing in her alien students the same fire that had helped humanity survive first contact. The conspirators thought they were protecting galactic civilization from contamination. Instead, they were about to learn why human combat doctrine had become the most transformative force in the galaxy. The Academy's systems detected multiple incoming ships dropping out of quantum space. The attack was beginning. Sarah activated the facility's combat protocols. Show them what humanity's students can do. The Black Ops team breached the Academy's outer defenses at exactly 300 hours. Their quantum-shifted armor rendered them nearly invisible, their neural dampeners designed to confuse alien sensory systems. They expected to find a training facility unprepared for actual combat. What they found was something else entirely. The first team encountered Orcs in the main corridor. The Arcturian appeared to be alone, their crystalline form gleaming softly in the emergency lighting. The team's leader, noting the single target, signaled for a standard containment protocol. That was their first mistake. Orcs shattered, not in their usual defensive pattern, but in a calculated explosion that turned their entire crystalline mass into hypersonic shrapnel. The crystalline fragments, honed by weeks of combat training, found every gap in the team's quantum-shifted armor. But worse than the physical damage was the psychological impact. The fragments carried echoes of Orcs' newly developed combat consciousness, broadcasting waves of tactical awareness and controlled fear. Multiple hostiles, B-Wing, Orcs' resonant voice echoed through their dispersed form. Cthin, they're using atmospheric scramblers. The Nephlox Collective had already detected the intrusion. Cthin had learned that their gaseous nature wasn't just about flowing through spaces, it was about understanding the fundamental principles of pressure and atmosphere. They concentrated their consciousness, creating microscopically precise pressure differentials throughout the Academy's ventilation system. The second strike team found their atmospheric scramblers useless as Cthin turned the very air against them. Precision pressure waves disrupted their quantum shifting, while carefully calculated gas mixtures rendered their neural dampeners ineffective. They're attempting to access the secure servers, Cthin reported, their voice rippling through carefully modulated air currents. Zixri, they're in your sector. The hive mind had been waiting. Zixri's 7 bodies, each now capable of independent action, while maintaining collective awareness, had set up an interlocking defense grid. The attackers found themselves facing an opponent that could be everywhere and nowhere, each body moving with perfect tactical coordination, while executing individual combat decisions. Sarah, Zixri communicated through their neural link. They're using Federation military protocols, but with modifications. These are private contractors. Sarah, monitoring the battle from the Academy's command center, recognized the significance. They're not official Federation forces. Project Purity hired deniable assets. She opened a channel to all her students. Remember your training. They expect aliens trying to fight like humans. Show them what humanity's real legacy looks like. The battle transformed into a demonstration of everything the Academy had achieved. Orcs turned the facility's architecture into a crystalline weapon, their fragments creating constantly shifting barriers and attack surfaces. Cthin weaponized the environmental systems, turning every pressurized line and atmospheric control into a combat multiplier. Zixri's bodies executed complex tactical maneuvers that would have been impossible for any single consciousness species. But more importantly, they worked together, implementing the core principle of human combat doctrine: adaptation. Orcs' crystals carried Cthin's atmospheric manipulations throughout the facility. Cthin's pressure waves enhanced Zixri's coordination capabilities. Zixri's tactical awareness helped Orcs, and Cthin maximize their effectiveness. The Black Ops team, despite their advanced technology and training, found themselves facing something unprecedented. Aliens who had learned not just human combat techniques, but the fundamental human principle of turning disadvantages into advantages. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, the Academy's medical units were treating 23 captured operatives, while Sarah's students had suffered no significant casualties. More importantly, they had secured evidence, quantum-encrypted communications, financial transactions, and mission parameters that linked directly back to Project Purity. Sarah found her students in the aftermath, each processing the experience in their own way. Orcs was exploring new crystalline configurations born from the combat. Cthin's gaseous form swirled with complex new tactical patterns. Zixri's bodies moved with even greater independence while maintaining their collective strength. "You understand now," she said, "why human combat doctrine changed the galaxy. It's not about superior strength or technology. It's about turning everything, even your supposed weaknesses, into tactical advantages." Vox's crystalline surface rippled with new awareness. "We are not what we were." "No," Sarah agreed. "You're what you chose to become. That's the real human legacy. Not teaching others to fight like us, but showing them how to become better versions of themselves." The Academy's quantum communications array activated, displaying an urgent message from the Federation Council. The battle had been monitored, the evidence transmitted, the truth about Project Purity revealed. But more importantly, the galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. The first true demonstration of how human combat doctrine could transform other species not by changing their nature, but by helping them understand their true potential. The age of human combat doctrine had entered a new phase. The question now was, how would the galaxy respond to what humanity had unleashed? The quantum feed displayed the latest headlines from across the galaxy. Human combat doctrine. Evolution or contamination. The recording of the Academy's defense had spread faster than light through the quantum networks, sparking fierce debate in every civilized system. Sarah watched her students' latest training session, noting how each had continued to evolve beyond their original parameters. Orcs now operated in a state of constant partial fragmentation, their crystalline consciousness existing simultaneously as both unified and dispersed. Cthin had developed such precise control over atmospheric pressure that they could manipulate quantum states through targeted molecular interaction. Zixri's hive mind had achieved a perfect balance between individual action and collective coordination. "Command override incoming," the Academy's AI announced. Priority transmission from the Arcturian High Council. Vox's crystalline form vibrated with unexpected tension. The message was brief but absolute. "Return to Arcturus Prime immediately. Combat modifications deemed potentially destabilizing to crystalline social structure." Before Sarah could respond, another override cut through their communications. The Nephlox Collective was recalling Cthin, citing unauthorized atmospheric manipulation techniques. A third transmission followed, the Zixri Unity demanding their hive mind's immediate return for psychological reintegration. "They're afraid," Zixri's primary body observed, while their other forms maintained their training routine. "Our evolution threatens their control." Sarah had expected resistance, but not this level of coordinated reaction. The Terra Empire's propaganda campaign had struck deeper than anyone anticipated, playing on ancient fears of change and contamination. "You don't have to go," she told her students, but even as she said it, she saw the deeper challenge in their expressions. Vox's surface showed complex interference patterns, their new way of expressing emotional states. If we stay, we confirm their fears. If we go, their form shifted, crystalline edges catching the light like bladed weapons. We show them what human combat doctrine truly means. Cthin's gaseous form coalesced into a density they hadn't been capable of before the training. The collective fears what it doesn't understand. Perhaps it's time they understood. The Unity believes they can simply reabsorb what we've learned, Zixri added, their bodies moving in complex patterns that demonstrated both independence and coordination. They don't realize that true strength comes from choice, not conformity. The Academy's quantum sensors detected multiple ships entering the system, diplomatic vessels from each of their respective civilizations. The message was clear. This wasn't a request, but a demand. Sarah gathered her students one last time in the training hall where their journey had begun. "Remember," she told them, "human combat doctrine isn't about winning every battle. Sometimes the greatest victory comes from knowing which battles to fight and how to fight them." Orcs initiated a new crystalline configuration, one that looked purely decorative but contained hidden combat capabilities. We will show them that adaptation isn't contamination. Thin dispersed through the room's atmosphere, their consciousness riding air currents in patterns that seemed random but carried deep tactical significance. Change can come through understanding, not just conflict. Zixri's bodies arranged themselves in a formation that emphasized both their unity and their individuality. And sometimes the most important battles are fought with wisdom rather than weapons. As her students prepared to depart, Sarah received a final transmission from the Federation Council. The message contained a single line: Operation Windfall authorized. She smiled, understanding the implications. While the galaxy's attention had been focused on the Academy's apparent setback, other humans had been quietly establishing combat training programs throughout Federation space. The departure ceremony was broadcast across the quantum networks. The galaxy watched as 3 of the Academy's most successful students seemingly submitted to their civilization's demands. No one noticed how Varx's crystalline structure had subtly changed the molecular composition of their diplomatic vessel, or how Kithin's atmospheric manipulations had altered their ship's environmental systems, or how Zixri's hive mind had already begun influencing their escort's neural patterns. Sarah watched the ships depart, knowing that her students weren't retreating. They were advancing on a different front. Human combat doctrine had taught them that sometimes the most effective path forward looked like a step back. The Academy's first class had graduated, not with ceremonies and certificates, but with a mission that would reshape their civilizations from within. They carried with them not just combat techniques, but a fundamental truth about humanity's gift to the galaxy: the ability to evolve beyond limitations, to turn resistance into opportunity, and to fight not just with weapons, but with wisdom. The real test was just beginning. The Terra Empire's challenge arrived exactly 1 month after Sarah's students returned to their homeworlds. The message, broadcast across all quantum frequencies, was carefully crafted to leave no room for diplomatic maneuvering. The Terran Combat Academy will demonstrate its methods in open combat trials. Failure to comply will confirm accusations of human psychological contamination of galactic society. Sarah received the message in the Academy's command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the ripple effects of her students' return home. Varx had sparked a revolution in Arcturian combat philosophy, their crystalline configurations inspiring a new generation of warriors. Finn's atmospheric manipulation techniques had transformed Neflok's military doctrine. Zixri's balanced approach to hive-mind combat had begun spreading through the Unity's collective consciousness. The Terra knew they were losing the cultural war. The trials were their attempt to discredit human combat doctrine once and for all. They're designed to exploit our weaknesses, Varx observed, their quantum-linked presence manifesting through a crystalline terminal. The trial's parameters target specific psychological vulnerabilities. The Terra had chosen their battlefield well. The first trial would test Varx's ability to maintain coherent form under concentrated sonic attack, a direct challenge to their fear of permanent fragmentation. Kithin would face a vacuum chamber equipped with quantum field generators designed to disrupt their atmospheric control. Zixri's trial involved forced separation of their bodies across distances that strained their hive mind's capabilities. They don't understand what they're really testing, Sarah told her students. They think these trials will expose the flaws in human combat doctrine. Instead, they're giving us the perfect opportunity to demonstrate its true power. The preparations began immediately. Varx spent days exploring the limits of their crystalline structure, learning to use the fear of fragmentation as a catalyst for new configurations. Finn developed techniques to maintain form even in near-vacuum conditions, turning the absence of atmosphere into a weapon. Zixri pushed the boundaries of their hive mind's independence, strengthening both individual and collective capabilities. The trials were scheduled for the Federation's Grand Arena, a massive space station designed for diplomatic exhibitions. Representatives from every major civilization would attend, eager to see whether human combat doctrine would prove to be the galaxy's salvation or its corruption. Sarah's students arrived separately, each making their own statement. Varx's crystalline form now contained layers of complexity visible only to the most sophisticated scanners. Thin's gaseous consciousness rode atmospheric currents with unprecedented precision. Zixri's 7 bodies moved with both perfect coordination and distinct individual purpose. The Kethera representatives, encased in their traditional battle armor, radiating confidence born of technological superiority, presented the first challenge. Varks stepped into the sonic chamber, their crystalline form catching the arena's lights in complex patterns. The attack began without warning. Concentrated sonic pulses designed to shatter any crystalline structure. The audience watched in fascination as Varks's form began to fragment, expecting either resistance or collapse. Instead, they witnessed something unprecedented. Varks turned their fragmentation into a weapon, each shard becoming a resonating point that redirected and amplified the sonic attack. Their consciousness, distributed through the crystal network, maintained coherence while existing in a state of controlled chaos. The Kethera weapons, faced with a target that embraced and weaponized its own vulnerability, proved useless. Thin's trial followed. The vacuum chamber activated, its quantum fields disrupting atmospheric coherence. But Thin had evolved beyond depending on traditional atmospheric conditions. Their consciousness compressed into a singularity of pure tactical awareness, using quantum field interactions to maintain form and function. The Kethera watched in disbelief as their containment systems were turned into conduits for Thin's influence. Zixri faced their trial with similar innovation. The forced separation of their bodies, instead of weakening their hive mind, demonstrated the true strength of coordinated independence. Each body operated with tactical autonomy while maintaining strategic unity, turning the Kethera's divide and conquer strategy against them. But the true test came when the Kethera, desperate to salvage their demonstration, launched an unexpected fourth trial: simultaneous combat against all 3 students. The arena erupted in chaos as automated combat drones attacked from every angle. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. Varks's crystalline shards carried Thin's atmospheric manipulations throughout the arena, while Zixri's distributed consciousness coordinated their combined efforts with impossible precision. Human combat doctrine wasn't just about individual adaptation. It was about turning diverse abilities into synchronized strength. The exhibition ended in just under 7 minutes. The Kethera drones lay defeated, and the arena's quantum sensors had recorded every moment of the unprecedented display of tactical evolution. Sarah received the Federation Council's verdict before the arena's audience had finished filing out. Human combat doctrine officially recognized as essential to galactic defense evolution. All restrictions on training programs lifted. Her students gathered one last time before returning to their homeworlds, each forever changed by their experience at the academy. "We are not what we were," Varks observed, their crystalline form resonating with new purpose. "We are what humanity taught us we could become," Thin added, their atmospheric presence carrying undertones of tactical awareness. Zixri's bodies moved in perfect harmony as they spoke, "And we will teach others the same truth." The age of human combat doctrine had been tested in the crucible of combat and emerged stronger than ever. The galaxy would never be the same. 5 years after the Kethera trials, Sarah stood at the Academy's observation deck, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. The diplomatic fleet carried representatives from every major civilization, gathering for what the Federation had dubbed the Terra Protocol Summit. The Academy had grown. What started as a single facility in Singapore now had branches on 17 worlds, each adapting human combat doctrine to local species and conditions. But today's demonstration would make those early training sessions look like children's games. Varks, now chief combat instructor for the Arcturian Defense Force, had arrived first. Their crystalline form had evolved into something beautiful and terrible. Layers of tactical consciousness expressed through precisely engineered crystal lattices. Beside them, Thin's gaseous form swirled with complex patterns that could rewrite atmospheric physics on a quantum level. The former student now led the Nephlok's Combat Evolution Division. Zixri's arrival drew particular attention. The hive mind, having revolutionized unity combat doctrine, now operated through 23 bodies, each one a master of independent tactical action, while maintaining perfect collective coordination. Perimeter breach. The Academy's AI cut through the diplomatic proceedings. Multiple quantum signatures detected. Terra radical faction vessels dropping out of FTL. Sarah's tactical display lit up with threat assessments. The radical faction, refusing to accept the new Galactic Order, had launched a desperate assassination attempt on the gathered Federation leadership. Their ships carried weapons specifically designed to counter known human combat techniques. What they didn't expect was how far those techniques had evolved. Orcs moved first, their crystalline form exploding outward to create a defensive grid that encompassed the entire diplomatic sector. But these weren't simple crystal fragments. Each shard carried complex tactical programs, transforming the defense grid into a three-dimensional combat computer. Kin's gaseous consciousness expanded through the Academy's environmental systems, turning atmosphere itself into a weapon. They had learned to manipulate air density with such precision that they could create microscopic force fields, protecting vital areas while launching concentrated atmospheric strikes against the attackers. Zixri's bodies deployed in a pattern that looked chaotic, but represented a new form of hive mind combat geometry. Each unit operated independently, while contributing to a greater strategic consciousness that could process and respond to threats faster than any individual mind. The radical faction's forces hit this integrated defense system like waves breaking against a quantum-reinforced shore. Every attack they launched was met with counterstrikes that seemed to anticipate their movements. Every strategy they attempted was turned against them by defenses that adapted faster than they could respond. But the true demonstration came when Sarah's former students coordinated their efforts. Verx's crystal matrix carried Kathin's atmospheric manipulations throughout the combat zone, while Zixri's distributed consciousness provided tactical oversight that bordered on precognition. Human combat doctrine had evolved beyond simple adaptation into something approaching tactical transcendence. The battle lasted less than 3 minutes. When it ended, the radical faction's ships were disabled, their crews captured, and not a single diplomatic casualty had been sustained. More importantly, every moment had been recorded and transmitted across the quantum networks. The galaxy watched as Verx used their crystalline form to create safe zones for the diplomats, while Kithin's atmospheric control neutralized enemy weapons with surgical precision. Zixri's bodies moved with impossible grace, each one protecting vital targets while maintaining perfect strategic coordination. In the aftermath, Sarah found her former students in the Academy's original training hall. They had changed so much, yet remained true to the core principles she had taught them. "We've evolved beyond what anyone thought possible," Orcs observed, their crystalline surface showing complex emotional harmonics. Finn's gaseous form pulsed with achieved potential. Yet we remain true to our natures, enhanced rather than overwritten. The greatest victory, Zixri's body spoke in seamless coordination, was learning that adaptation doesn't mean losing ourselves. The Federation Council's response to the incident was swift and definitive. The Terra Protocol was officially established as the foundation for all future galactic defense initiatives. Human combat instructors were now the most sought-after military advisors in known space, teaching not just fighting techniques, but the fundamental principles of tactical evolution and adaptation. Sarah watched as her students departed to continue spreading their knowledge throughout the galaxy. They had become more than warriors. They were living proof that humanity's greatest gift to the cosmos wasn't teaching others how to fight, but showing them how to grow beyond their own limitations, while remaining true to themselves. The age of human combat doctrine had matured into something greater, a testament to the power of adaptation, the strength of diversity, and the endless potential for growth that lay within every species. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.